Abebe of the Intercultural Affairs for the invitation to come and share with you on this Black History Month. And what I would like to deal with, of course, is black culture and the challenge of black history. This, as all of y'all know, is Black History Month. And it is very important for us to take time every year, and in fact all year, but especially during this month, so that we can in fact recollect, reassemble ourselves, and begin to redevelop and reaffirm our historical memory. A lot of times people lose contact with life in the present because they have no foundation and no base in the past. History is not just something that happened long ago. History is what's happening now. History is a very human thing. We bring it into being with what we do and do not do. When we raise images above the earth that reflect our capacity for human greatness in the Nile Valley, we make history. But also when we fail to do that which we, as a people, self-conscious of its self and its interest, when we fail to do that which we should do, that also is noted and it becomes a historical item. So we need to stop a moment in time sometimes and look at where we are and ask where we ought to be. We need to stop and ask the fundamental questions that Fanon said everybody must eventually ask him or herself. Those questions are, who am I? Am I really who I am? And am I all I ought to be? These are historical questions. Who am I? But before I get into that, let me pay homage to the people who made our history possible. I can't possibly give homage to all of them, but I would just like to mention some that immediately come to mind and that serve as models of human possibility. First, let me say homage to Carter G. Woodson, who in 1926 established this Black History Month. He taught us to study and respect our history as a way of studying and respecting our humanity. He understood what Garvey would later teach, that in the record of what a people has done is evidence of what they could do. Garvey said it, and he's right. What humans have done, humans can do. But how do you know what you've done if you don't know your history? Carter G. Woodson also understood that history and humanity are dialectically linked. They're inseparable. And that the greatest, and that the disappreciation or ignorance of one's history is a sign and source of disappreciation for one's own humanity. And likewise, appreciation and knowledge of one's history is at the same time an appreciation and knowledge of one's humanity. And we will talk about that later when I get to a discussion of history in general. Second, I'd like to say homage to Malcolm X, the fire prophet, who heaped coals on the head of the oppressor, who burned through their lives and told the white man who was masquerading as a man, I'm the man you think I am. Malcolm taught us the value and truth of history by saying of all our studies, history is most prepared to reward our research. Malcolm X saw that the greatest part of history is hidden, that truth always lies below the surface of what is seen and taught by the ruling race class, and that it is our moral obligation to unearth the richness of our own past and use it as a foundation to build a more human and meaningful future. And homage to Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, who taught us to appreciate the special uniqueness of being black in the world. Dr. Bethune said, I'm glad I was not born white. Not because I don't like white folks, but because there's a special challenge in being black in a white world. And that if I was born white, I would not have had the challenges I had, and I would not have achieved as much. We're talking about Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, who with $1.50 in a pocket walked to an empty lot and dreamed of Tillman Cookman College and built a college at a time when even white folks weren't building college. Homage also to Cheikh Anta Diop, one of the world's greatest Egyptologist. I would say the greatest. He taught us to appreciate our Nile Valley civilization, which produced Egypt, the greatest civilization in antiquity. It is Cheikh who taught us that until we rescue and reconstruct the history and civilization of Egypt, we'll always look like debtors to the world rather than the world being indebted to us. He taught us that Egypt is our classical civilization, the same way Greece is the classical civilization of you. And so we appreciate these people, and we use them as models to emulate. Because, as I said earlier, what Garvey said remains true. What humans have done, humans can do. And these people point the way to what we can do. When we talk about making history, we must understand we're talking at the same time about making culture. In 1965, I argued that the key crisis and challenge in black life is a culture crisis and challenge, a challenge in views and values which limit or expand human and social possibilities. After 22 years of theoretical and practical work on the issue, I am even more convinced of the centrality, even the indispensability of a cultural revolution which rescues and reconstructs our history and at the same time rescues and reconstructs our humanity and lays the basis for building a more dynamic liberational culture and future. But a lot of people don't see culture as fundamental as I do. Mainly a lot of times because they don't ever define culture. Or when they do define culture, they reduce it to song and dance. Culture is more than song and dance. Culture is the totality of thought and practice of a people. And what happens here with us as African people is that sometimes we unconsciously lean more toward popular culture than national culture. And I argue that a people must, above all, if it is to keep its sanity and make its definitive contribution to the forward flow of human history, if it is to speak its own special truth to the world, it must build and maintain a national culture as opposed to a popular culture. Now, what is this popular culture? Popular culture is a fluid, unconscious reaction to daily life. Things go on, we go on. They happen, we respond to them. But that's not all we should do, huh? It seems to me that we should already anticipate things happening and be able to dictate the course of events. That's the difference between letting history happen behind your back and self-consciously taking it, seizing it, and shaping it in your own image and interest. National culture, on the other hand, is the instrument by which we take history in our hands and shape it in our own image and interest. Because national culture, and I should say national, I talk with a southern accent, if you must have gathered by now, and sometimes I say things real quickly and you might not know, but I'm going to say the national, N-A-T-I-O-N-A-L, national. And when I say it real quick, it's national, but it's still national, okay? What is national culture? National culture is the self-conscious, did you hear that? The self-conscious collective thought and practice by which a people creates itself, celebrates itself, develops and sustains itself, and introduces itself to history and humanity. We make ourselves into what we are. Do you understand that? It does not happen. It's not like somebody reaching from a cloud, touching us with a magic wand. We, Garvey said, have dominion over the space we occupy called Earth. We must carve out of that experience something meaningful and human and ethical and spiritual and enrich our lives and dare greatness. But if you don't think consciously, you might do anything. The self-conscious thought and practice by which a people creates itself, celebrates itself, develops and sustains itself, and introduces itself to history and humanity. When the rest of the people of the world assemble and say what they have done, what will African Americans say they've done? Certainly we must pay homage to our past great civilization, but we must also be able to contribute to it, because a generation that does not advance its people, its community, its culture beyond that which its parents did is a generation that has less reason for existence. And we don't do more than our parents explain to me what's our role in history. And we don't push the community to a higher level of human life, then what role do we play in human life? But without the context of a culture, you can't do that. You can't make history. History will happen behind your back, and even when you're in the process of it, you wonder what's happening. So that what we argue here is that black people must see themselves in serious terms. We must see ourselves in three basic ways as vanguard. And I will explain it all through my lecture and end up with it in terms of Fanon's hope for us as those who make a new human history. We are three kinds of vanguard. And in making our culture and pushing our history, we must deal with that. I said we must make a national culture. And I wanted to give you some examples of national culture. When James Weldon Johnson sat down and wrote, Lift Every Voice and Sing, and wrote a national anthem for us, this was a conscious effort directed toward what? Celebration of us, creation of us, and pointing us toward liberation and a high level of human life. And Marcus Garvey said, here are your colors, black, red, and green. Black for the people, red for the struggle, green for the future and hope that comes from that struggle. He was, in fact, helping create national culture. And when I created Kwanzaa to introduce and reinforce 7 fundamental values that serve as a social glue for black community life, that's self-conscious culture. And we could go on and on like that in terms of national culture, but we must extract it. Our national culture is also sometimes unrecognized. The legacy of Coltrane is national culture. Usually, even in, usually what's so cool about this is in terms of national culture, usually we associate ourselves with music, you know what I mean? We are tough musicians, but more and more we are losing the appreciation for our own music, crossing over, being confused, and letting the European become the caretaker of our music. This is cold, but you never would think this would happen. That used to be the one way we would speak to the world in our own special voice. But because of this problem of integration, which we'll talk about later, what has happened is that the black middle class at first, a segment of the black middle class, with escapist fantasies, turn their back on their blackness, put on a pair of green, blue, and purple eyes, and fantasized about escape. We are and must play the role to make our culture, to make history. We must honor the historical role we've already played, build on it and expand it. What are the roles we already played? First of all, we're the historical vanguard of the world. We're the fathers and mothers of human civilization. In fact, we're the fathers and mothers of humanity. We're the first ones who stood up. Do you understand? Even the white man had to finally put on Time magazine that the first people were black. Now, he might want to call them by Hebrew name Adam and Eve, which just means man and woman. You know what I mean? He might do that if he wants to, but everybody that's had any remote acquaintance with archaeology or anthropology or just plain history know that the first people in the world were black people. We stood up, spoke the first language. But we also introduced the basic disciplines of human knowledge in the Nile Valley civilization, Ethiopia, Nubia, and Egypt. Science, math, geometry, religion, medicine. We were the first sacred text. Not the Jew, not the Gentile, black people. So we don't have to walk in the pale shadow of our oppressor and imagine we have to bow down and excuse ourselves for not having a God before they came. We will talk about that when we get to religion, though. I just thought that was important to mention. We are the historical vanguard then. Second, and we have to honor that legacy. Second, we are an ethical and spiritual vanguard. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X taught us that we're the moral conscience of America. We are the one who raised the issue of social justice when justice was being raped on the altar of things called slavery and Jim Crowism. We raised that issue. And in the 1960s, we launched, waged, and explained a struggle and won a struggle that benefited not only us, but all of America, especially marginal people, other third world people, other people of color, women, the senior citizens, the disabled, benefited from the struggle. We wait so that our struggle has human implications. What I say tonight is not about just black people. I'm talking about a world historical people, African people who since the beginning of time has affected the course of human history. And I'm talking about African people in America who have liberalized this regime and struggled and confronted it with its contradiction more than any other people here. And this is not to take anything from the other people. It just says that we have been the vanguard. It doesn't mean other people didn't help us. It doesn't mean that other people didn't walk with us, die with us, fight with us. It just means we were the vanguard. Given our location, given our historical role, we stepped forward and we struggled. And that's a history we've got to honor. And that's a history we meet here to celebrate. Not to whine and say everything that's wrong, but to talk about what we've achieved. Sometimes blood be whining so much about what's wrong, they don't even remember what they've done. I did a TV interview yesterday, I think it was. And the TV interview kept wanting me to say something was wrong. She tried to get me to attack Jesse. She just wanted me to talk. Then she said, well, I can understand you must be frustrated. I said, hold up. First of all, I'm not frustrated. My people are not frustrated. We are righteously angered by injustice. But frustration is a psychological analysis. Let's make a political one. When the white man fought against Britain, nobody said that George Washington was frustrated. The white man just want to reduce us to a bundle of emotions. Then he can dismiss our whole struggle. What's wrong with this guy? What's happening here is that, the key to everything, black people, friends, guests, the key to everything is watching the definition. You know, the greatest power in the world is not the atom split. Greatest power is the power to define reality and make it stick. Right. If I can define your reality, I'll make you the opposite of yourself and you applaud it. You see, words or categories are not just descriptions of reality, they become forms of reality when we organize relationships around them. There's no such thing as a Negro. But the white man, in order to create a being that was pliable and compliant, took away his name, erased his historical memory, created, cultivated historical amnesia, and produced a guy with no history. A woman with no memory. And because they could not remember where they came from, they were glad to be where they are. And because they could not remember, they built cities and controlled their own destiny and daily life. They were glad to just be a part of someone else's life and were hurt when they were rejected. That's just part of the people. Now, that's not all the people. Far from me to come in here and say everybody's like that. I'm talking about a serious problem, a serious segment of the population that needs help. Do you understand? in terms of, and the majority of that is in the middle class. Although in the working class, you got the problem, and certainly in the underclass or the lumpen class, you got that problem. But the main problem I'm addressing, because y'all have more contact with them, is the middle class. That segment that actually wants to deny its own historical reality and does not use its talent in the way that Du Bois asked it to do. Du Bois said that our race, like anybody else's race, will be saved by its best minds. But Du Bois didn't say the other part of it. And later on he recognized that. These minds must have the right heart. And they must commit class suicide and identify with the aspirations of the masses. Otherwise, they are just skillful collaborators, skillful buck dancers. So that what we are here today to talk about is how do we break past the basic contradictions in our lives as black people, build on the strength that we have internally, and overturn our weaknesses. What Cabral calls turning weaknesses into strength and daring liberation and a higher level of human life. That's what I want to talk about. Not whine, not all that. I want to make an analysis that talks about our strength, both historically and currently, and ask how can this be used to build a new and more human and beautiful future. Fanon said it is up to us. We cannot ask Europe to do it. Europe don't have the will or the ability to do it. When Europe controlled the world in the form of the United States, its disoriented child, U.S. is the disoriented child of Europe. Do you understand? When they had the power in 1945, the whole world was laid low. Russia was in shambles, lost 20 million people. Europe was begging for welfare called the Marshall Plan. Only the United States stood untouched. On reasons that say, rescue me if I'm wrong, if I'm lying on you, you have the right to correct me. That's why it bugs me when people be talking about what are blacks so violent. Who's killed more people than the Europeans? And when they run out of energy picnicking on us, they went picnicking on themselves. The key thing, I'm telling you, is the struggle to win the hearts and minds of our people. I said it in '65, I say it now. I don't change. We used to talk with brothers that used to say, pick up the gun. You got to get the gun. I said, look, as for guns, we can find them anywhere, including on the bodies of the enemies. What's important is that the people know why they're struggling, and then they will develop both the method and the means. But the people must know before they pick up the gun who they're going to shoot and why they're going to shoot. Right. Otherwise, as Fanon has proved in psychological studies all over the world, they shoot each other. So what we have to do is understand that the struggle is for the hearts and minds of the people to make black people and all people who desire freedom self-conscious agents of their own liberation. Right. So they can speak with their own mouth, as the ancient Egyptians said. Speak with their own mouth, see with their own eyes, and move with the force of their own will. Not to be pale reflections of an even whiter reality, but to be original human beings, free from all the derivative impositions that slave masters would impose on them. So I said that the key battle is the battle to break the monopoly that the oppressor has on our mind. Because until we break the monopoly the oppressor has on our mind, liberation is not only impossible, it's unthinkable. And what you can't conceive, you can't achieve. If you've never heard of reform, revolution seems mad. If you don't even know black people once ruled themselves for anybody to say, let's have some of this land for ourselves, sound like they've gone off on a tangent. You're happy with a Volvo and a rented or bought house. Do you understand? I mean, it's a difference in deficient modeling. How you think dictates what social practice you engage in. Now, if you're going to make history, I said you must engage in culture construction. And when I say culture, I said it was a totality of thought and practice by which a people creates itself, celebrates itself, sustains, develops itself, and introduces itself to history and humanity. But they do it in 7 fundamental areas. First, on the level of history itself, as social practice. Second, religion or spirituality, in the area of religion and spirituality. Next, in social organization. Next, economic organization. After that, political organization, creative production, which is your art, music, and literature. And finally, your ethos, which is the collective self-consciousness that a people gets as a result of practice on the other 6 levels. Let me talk about these 7 areas and talk about why they are important to discuss in terms of Black History Month and in terms of cultural construction. The first area that we get into in talking about culture is, of course, history. That's the fundamental reason we meet tonight. But historical practice is at the same time cultural practice. Because what is history? History is not some dead data about kings and queens in a book. History is the struggle and record of humanity in the process of shaping the world in their own image and interests, of making nature an ally rather than an enemy, and harmonizing human society so that a better place in the world can be for all. Likewise, African history is a struggle and record of African people in the process of Africanizing their world, shaping it in their own image and interest. So that when we talk about history, I don't want you to think of it as something abstract. I'm thinking of it as a process, first of struggle, then a record. Because without the struggle, there is no record. You can't write, unless you're lying, what you haven't done. History must be what you have done. So history, first of all, is a struggle. It's a struggle to do. And even when you don't do, when you fail to do, that also is recorded. I told you history is greatness achieved, but it's also missed opportunities. Why is history so important, and why should we write it ourselves? Because not only should we make it ourselves, we should write it ourselves. And when I talk about history, I said it's a struggle. I'm appealing to you to take a self-conscious interest in what you do. That's why I tell my students, you don't have the right to be wrong. You don't have the right to be rowdy and stuff and misrepresent me to the white man or to the world. People think they can just walk through life sometimes and say, I'm me. You know you're not you. You're what the world sees you as. People say, well, no, I'm a human being. Stop lying to yourself. You are black. You're an African. And you know it, and I know it. The white man knows it. The Chinese and Japanese know it. Everybody I know knows it. It's amazing you don't. Yeah. So we're all cultural representatives of our people. Is that fair to say? And you can tell you know you're black because if you went in a restaurant, I've told you this, if you went into a restaurant and the blood got out of line, you'd be embarrassed by it. Even those people don't want to recognize at some level that they're black are forced into recognizing the fact that black freedom and dignity are indivisible. And they tell her all of us are free, none of us are free. And the thing that saves us from being lynched or brutalized or run across the road and killed like the brother in Howard Beach or raped and written upon with letters of KKK like the sister in upper New York was not our education, not our economics, but our absence. So that it seems to me we must clear a space of freedom for all of us until we make the world safe for all of us are vulnerable. And people might lie and say, well, I got enough money, I get away from this. I don't watch Oprah Winfrey. But one day, Harold Cruz and Brooke and Benjamin Hooks were on it. And Oprah came out and surprised me. But she got mad. But she got mad because it touched her personally. We must take every insult to blacks personally. But Oprah said she went down. Oprah got a little money, you know. Oprah's a millionaire. And Oprah was telling on TV that she went, I guess up or downtown. I forget what you call where blood live and where white live. Up or downtown Manhattan. And she got there at this exclusive store, and she knocked on the door, and the white woman didn't even let her in. So Oprah, she said, well, I wonder what happened. The white woman said it closed. So she went across the store. You know how blood is. Blood knows something wrong. You know what I mean? We've been at this a long time. So blood goes to the store. Get in this other store, she calls back. She asked the white woman at the other store, say, hey, is that store open? White woman say, yes, open. She said, well, use my phone and call. And Oprah called, and the people said, yeah, we open. But they didn't know that was Oprah. Oprah hung up and ran over there again. Same thing, closed. But I'm just showing you. She finally wrote a letter and all that. And guy explained that he had an incident with a transvestite, and he didn't want no more trouble with blacks or something. I don't know what. So Oprah said, first of all, I'm insulted that he would even think I look like one or something. Second, she asked a question. If he had trouble with a white homosexual or transvestite, would he close it down to all the white folks? No, they wouldn't. But it shows that racism still exists in America, and that much of our struggle is against that. History is important to us because incidents like that and struggles against them are part of our very life. And to close our minds to that is a form of madness. To close our mind to what is real and what needs attention is to, at the same time, leave these problems unattended and let them come back to haunt or destroy us. History is important, black people, not only because it's a struggle, but because it's a contribution to our self-understanding. When Francis Fanon asked the questions I asked at the beginning, who am I? Am I really who I am, and am I all I ought to be? He must have sensed those questions can only be answered in history. In the final analysis, those questions can only be answered by history, and that history is never personal. It's always collective. Even when you act as a person, you act as a part of a collective group. People say, hey, baby, don't call me black, I'm human. See, the protest is suspect right there. I assume you're human. You walking, you talking, you understand? Can we get to something else? The assumption is that you're human. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't ask you nothing. I don't walk around talking to chickens. So we don't even need to discuss that. The very fact that you need to declare that already expresses an insecurity about your claim. But let me remind you this. Humanity is nothing but a construction for the convenience of conversation. It means nothing except the totality of the people that make it up. Without the people that make up humanity, there is no humanity. Sit here in your mind and imagine a person that doesn't have an ethnic or national identity. Can you? Quickly. You can. Because everybody is socio-historically located in time and place. And the question is, what kind of human you are, and how do you express your particular kind of humanity? That's why it's almost criminal for whites and blacks who are off base to imagine they can convince us to go out of existence in order to please the very people who hate us. That's what they say. Why don't you just become teasing Tam? Then we wouldn't have this problem. We don't have the problem because of our color. We have the problem because a man got a problem about our color. He needs to be restrained. this is reality. I mean, let's face it. I mean, if somebody is so disoriented because somebody's another color, they got problems. And what you've got to understand is that it is a disloyalty to our history and to those people who did so much to make us who we are, to turn our back on our blackness and pretend we can escape from that which is beautiful. Human diversity is not the source of human division. Human hatred and struggle over resources and unjust systems are the source of this human conflict. And what we have to do is make a distinction between color, which is a natural thing, and a socially constructed system that assigns a negative worth to color. Because after all the conversation about race, race ain't real. Race is nothing but a socio-biological category used to assign human worth and social status using white folks as the paradigm. Does that mean I don't believe in peoplehood? Of course that doesn't mean that. I'm an African man. I'm a black man, all right? That already says I recognize peoplehood, but I don't recognize this sick category, race, which the white man created to facilitate oppression of third world people, and to build a system called racism. And quickly I should tell you that racism is not racial prejudice. A lot of times people get racial prejudice mixed up with racism. Racial prejudice is an attitude, hatred for somebody or dislike for somebody because of their physical features. Yellow hair and blue eyes, or dark hair and dark eyes. That's all the white man did was get mad with me. I couldn't care less. What bothers me is he can turn his anger and hatred into public policy. That's what racism is. It's a system of denial and deformation of a people's history, humanity, and right to freedom based exclusively or primarily on this species concept of race. And it expresses itself in three fundamental ways: as historical imposition, an act of force and violence in which the white man imposes his history on us, lifts us out of our own history, and makes us a footnote in his own. You've seen it in the books, haven't you? We don't show up until he's there and he makes us relevant. Here we're in Africa 1,000,000 years before he even comes up. He's caving. When we at our height, the guy is struggling with cave atmosphere. And he has nerve enough to run over here and assign us human worth by putting a measure to our nose and lips and putting us in a corner of the world and its history based on that. That's why when people say to me, Mexicans and blacks are reverse racist, they're categorical and precise. We got to deal with categorical precision here. Something means everything, it don't mean nothing. You understand? You just can't throw a word out here because you're struggling. You have to know what you're saying. You can't be a reverse racist. You can't be a racist if you don't have the power to impose. The first criteria for racism is the power to impose. You can be prejudiced. You can be prejudiced. You can not like somebody. That's another problem altogether. You know what I'm saying? We can handle people that can't do nothing to us and don't like us. You see them all day. You know what I'm saying? Matter of fact, you might even call them out. You know what I mean? But it's different when a guy can send you in captivity and hack years out of your life, or send you to the gas chamber or the electric chair, or make your children unable to go to college, or makes it so you can't go and live in the best of circumstances, or not work or get a job that you're trained for and are capable of holding. That's a whole different kind of thing. That's an imposition that no black or Mexican or Puerto Rican or Native American can make, even if they wanted to. Second, racism is ideological justification for the behavior. You heard it, the religious and biological absurdities. God made the white man first, and it's his manifest destiny to go around the world and spread civilization and a couple of other things that wiped out whole people. White shall triumph over black like light over dark, that kind of absurdity. And we shall make them hewers of wood and drawers of water and make them bow their head as they walk by. You heard it in South Africa, you heard it in Israel against the Palestinians, you heard it in America. Where people get God to underwrite their injustices toward other people. If you ever want to do something wrong, get God to underwrite it, and it go over big. I remember when Mussolini invaded Ethiopia, the Pope blessed them as they went. I remember white chaplains, every war they fought, they had God underwrite. I saw Reagan, a decadent old cowboy, imitating B-rated movies, get up on television after having cut off Social Security and disability, say in God's name, when he demanded that disabled people rode to Washington in a wheelchair to prove they need the aid he just cut off. Every oppressor uses what he can to manipulate the minds of the masses. History is also important because it, in fact, teaches us to respect our own humanity. History and humanity are dialectically linked, black people. And the greater appreciation you have for your history, the greater appreciation you have for your humanity. And the greater your disappreciation and ignorance of your history, the greater your disappreciation and ignorance of your humanity. And it doesn't even matter how much money you have. Did you know that? You can ask Michael that. You can have all the money in the world, but if you hate yourself,
that's right,
you'll disfigure yourself. Look at Michael. I'm not against Michael. I have great empathy for this man. He's struggling in a racist climate. He cannot understand why multi-million dollars can't buy respect from the rulers of this society. He is spiritually mutilated, so then he takes a knife to his nose and cheeks to look like the people who caused the pathology in him in the first place. That's a tragedy. And we must indict the people who provoke these tragedies. Because history and humanity are dialectically linked. Michael can't clear his problem until he root himself in his own history and respect what his people have done. He must study. Instead of buying them bones, he needs some books. Isn't it tragic that we who are the fathers and mothers of human civilization have to bow down to a man who is late, who is a latecomer? History and humanity are dialectically linked, I told you. Let me give you another example. I always use this example, and you can see it so clear. People need a history in order to feel human, and when they are ignorant of their history, don't know it, don't appreciate it, they doubt their own humanity. And they'll make all kinds of self-mutilating acts in order to get a sense of humanity through somebody else's history. Look at the black women and men that walk across the campus here or on UM campus. You see them, they're light. You know what they are. You start moving toward them. You know these are bloods. That's why you're moving toward them. But you go and you ask them, what are you? And they say, French, German, Spanish, and some black. Did you hear that? Now, why did they say all them white folks first? Not because they were fascinated with white, but because they, in claiming these whites, were claiming a history that gave them a greater sense of humanity. Nobody challenges German or French or Spanish history. That's why the Mexicans say they Spanish sometimes rather than Mexican. Do you understand that? Nobody challenges. And because they do not challenge the history, they don't challenge the humanity. So what they're doing is trying to appropriate a history that has an unchallenged humanity to it. Only humans have history. Dogs and other animals have pedigree. So if you don't have a history, you must wonder about your humanity. And that's why the white man tried to claim all relevant history. That is why he lifted Egypt out of Africa and put it in southern Europe. Egypt is the only country in history that ever had to justify its geography. It had to explain why it was in Africa. continued in history of contributing to the forward flow of human history. So it's not just loss of life, even though that's more than monstrous in itself, but the loss and destruction of human civilization and the possibility of a free and achieving Africa, unfolding in its own terms, free, proud, and productive. History is also important because it offers us models to emulate. When we look at how the white man puts us on television, we see we need new models, whores and pimps. Have you seen them? And at best, comedians. Let me say this before I go into my thing about comedians and sports people, that I have great respect for Bill Cosby, and I don't want nobody to think I'm talking about him. And I don't want you to think that I think comedy is wrong. I think it's right, and I think Bill Cosby demonstrated a certain ingenuity, a certain will and determination after having been rejected so long because the white man wanted a pathological family. Bill Cosby deserved credit for producing a healthy family. Nobody on dope. The father didn't get killed after the second show. You know, that kind of stuff. And I give him credit. But you know what's sad is that not that Bill makes the $88 million a year, but that blacks can't do it in any other field except sports. And all of it's in entertainment for the white man. Rescue me if I'm wrong. He locks us down into certain areas, and we can't go any further without struggling. Now, we have broken out of that, but we need to fight even more. We have the right to all public wealth and space in this country. We don't need 5 states, we need 50. This is our land. We gave to it. How dare the white man call it white because he got a little poster of Uncle Sam on his desk? That's nothing to me. But we have to contend for this. Do you understand? You can't just, oh, this is the white man. This is not the white man's country. First of all, we got to talk to the Native Americans. We got to talk to the Native Americans. Everybody who made any contribution to this country has a part of it. And it's going to be a multinational project or it won't exist at all. Malcolm said it, if there's no freedom, there can never be any peace. If there's no social justice, there would never be social peace. That's just reality. And you have to take that stand. Now, history gives us models to emulate, people who never accepted what the road the white man set for them. Malcolm X, that's why I quoted him at the beginning. He said the white man talking about manhood, and the white man trying to threaten his manhood. He said, I'm the man you think you are. If it don't take no legislation to make you free, don't take none to make me free. And if you want to know what I do for my freedom, think what you'll do for yours and then double it. We need models like that. The man is a fire prophet. We need models in history like Harriet Tubman, the great hunter who hunted the forest of oppression until the beast begged for relief. She didn't, they did. We need models like Anna Julia Cooper, one of the most brilliant women thinkers and persons in this century who anticipated all the feminist argument Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan in writing this. Germaine Greer and all that. Anna Julia Cooper had already put it together in a little volume called A Voice from the South. And at 63, she was teaching at 19, and at 63 went to the Sorbonne and got her PhD. We need models like that. We need models like Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, as I said, who was a dreamer, who taught us we had a great heritage we must honor or be shamed for not doing it. We need models, and we have models. Amy Jack Garvey, Yaa Santawa, Martin King, Queen Nzinga, W. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass, people so great that when they stood up, they were the heights of mountains, and when they lay down, they were the length of rivers. They were strong because they were models of African and human possibility. And they teach us, as Garvey said, what humans have done, humans can do. And they teach us that we who are the fathers and mothers of human civilization have no business playing the culture children of the world. The second area, and I know I spent a lot on that first area, because this is a sum up area. Malcolm said it. The second area of culture is religion or spirituality. We are the most religious people in the world. Is that fair to say? Now, if you stayed with me on that first part, don't get shaky on this. This is a very delicate issue I'm getting ready to bring up here. We are the most religious people I know. Now, all poor people are religious, but we are extra religious. Even when we got money, we're religious. So spirituality is key to us. Do you understand that? As African people, spirituality is central to us. That's why in Africa, we didn't have no Sunday, where you just get up, claps, and then start sinning from Monday to Saturday. Every day was religiously significant. Do you understand that? Because every day was an ethical expression of your commitment to community and others. It was a commitment to a higher level of human life. So you don't set aside a Sunday where you get in there and shout and carry on. But now things have changed. People take religion as a form of exercise. We got churches in California called drive-ins. You don't even have to get out and go in. You just drive up. There's a bucket for you to drop some money there. You can't, they ain't gonna never get that modern where they don't have a bucket for this money. You understand? But what happened is that people began to see religion as like a social expression of, I don't know what it was. It's paying your duty. Like Pascal said, you better not believe it's a God, but just in case it is, you ought to go. You know what I mean? And try to get things straight. That's what Pascal argued. I mean, you know, so I don't even know sometimes why people think religion is relevant, except they might be afraid not to. But if religion, and I argue for a high level of spirituality, if spirituality and religion are relevant, it must find its relevance in social ethics. In spite of all the conversations about theology and heaven talk, the core of any religion worth its name and higher claims is ethics. By ethics, I mean thought and practice which deals with that which is right and wrong and our obligation to others. Thought and practice concerned with human welfare and human excellence. And we who are so spiritually inclined, we must take the best out of our spirituality and begin to practice and teach a social ethics that affects this society. We already have a history of setting the moral and progressive agenda for America. That is why Jesse's campaign in '84 was so strong, because Jesse continued our historical tradition of setting the moral and progressive agenda for America. It was Jesse who at great expense to himself called for justice in the Middle East, called for a balanced policy, and spoke for the Palestinians when other people were penalized, when he was penalized for it and other people were scared, crawling around on the floor, arguing issues like whether they're going to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Justice said justice in the Middle East, that the Palestinians have as much right to a state as Israelis, and they need to sit down and talk and stop killing. Justice spoke up for the voiceless, talked for women and the disabled and third world people when other candidates were walking the central cop-out line. Rescue me if I'm wrong. So I like Jesse for doing that, because it honored Martin and Malcolm, two of our greatest spiritual spokespersons, who said, Martin said, a religion that says it is concerned with the human soul and not with the body and the conditions in which the body lives is a moribund and bankrupt religion and shouldn't be respected. And Malcolm said, I would never honor God that don't let me fight for my people. And a religion does not inspire and encourage me to fight for the freedom of my people. I say to hell with that religion. We need to take that attitude. We need to speak for the voiceless. We need to stress social justice. We need to build on the ancient Egyptian tradition, our classical tradition, which says, struggle to give food to the hungry, water to the thirsty, clothes to the naked, and a boat to those without one. Be a father to the orphan and a husband to the widow without exploiting any of them. Do what pleases God and elevates man and woman. That's our heritage. I know you heard it in the Christian church, but this is thousands of years before that. And they build on that tradition, Jew and Christian. The Ten Commandments that Moses had is already thousands of years before that in the book of Coming Forth by Day. The Declaration of Virtue that you heard It's thousands of years older than that same passage in the Christian Bible. The concept of the risen Savior, the concept of immortality, all that is already in our own tradition. I say this not to discredit Christianity or Judaism, but to show you we don't have to walk in anybody's shadow. We don't have to be derivative because we have the basis for being original. And we must respect ourselves. If you know the history, though, you know that. Right. I'm going to tell you something. Don't let me lose you when I tell you this. You know, when the white man claims he brought us God, this is an awesome claim. People don't want to face it, but this is an awesome claim. If you accept what I said earlier, that we're the first people in the world, maybe 1,750,000 years ago, humanoid type, maybe 35,000, 40,000 years ago, that's before anybody. Do you understand? Now, here comes a whole period, thousands of years, God who speaks to everybody, every preacher you ever met said God told him something. Is that fair to say? God's the same yesterday as it was, same yesterday as he is today, and tomorrow he won't be no different. Is that what y'all heard? You have to really hate yourself, be ignorant or have thought of this, and I hope it's the last. To imagine that you could live in the world tens of thousands of years and God never say anything to you, and then when he says something, he said to some desert dwellers and asked them to say it to you in a language you can't read or understand. In fact, that's not the way it went, is it? In fact, it's already in our book. And it does not mean that other people didn't have their own narrative, their own revelation, but black people don't have to play second to anybody on it. So one of the other things you got to do when we're talking about doing things for history is snatch that white picture of God off the wall. You see, the white man, listen, the white man got an arrogance you won't believe. Not only does he claim he's the model of humanity, he claims he's God. In fact, he put his picture on the black church wall and had black people praying to it, believing it was God, when in fact it was Michelangelo's cousin. Everybody, you look at that man, you know that couldn't be God. If that's God, y'all in trouble. You understand? But it shows the arrogance, the culture and racial arrogance of the white man, that he would appropriate God's identity and have us pay homage to it. You got to tell your preacher tomorrow, take that picture down. Do you understand? You can't really respect yourself or what God stands for to let the white man keep masquerading arrogantly as God. But above all, the whole thing, I'm telling you, is to teach and practice social justice. If we don't struggle for a better world, for a more human world, for respect for the human personality, if we don't stress the sacredness of the human personality, then what are we living for, and how will we ever live together in peace? And again, we must rescue and reconstruct our ancient history found in the Hosea and other sacred texts in ancient Egypt. They predate Hebrew, Greek, Christian, Islamic teachings, and they can add to the great religious heritage of humanity. As I said, this is said not for you to abandon your faith, but to approach it with more information and more respect for your cultural history. You have to make a distinction between your religious beliefs and your cultural history, which goes back far beyond your current religious belief. And it does not take anything from your belief in God if you're more informed about who and why God is. As James Cone says, you must know that God is the God of the oppressed, not of the oppressor. If God is the God of the oppressor, you don't need him at all. And if God is not in the world and working on behalf of those who are powerless, those who are voiceless, those who need, then he's not God at all by definition. Just think about it. If God is not for good, he must be for bad. And that's what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad called the devil, the embodiment of historical evil. Not a spook in the sky scaring people, but a person, a group of people on the earth that represent and embody historical evil. That's what he taught. We don't have to go into that any deeper, but I just want you to understand that religion is a very serious thing, and we must come to terms with how we're going to relate, not just to God, but to each other. Even the Christians teach, don't they? How can you say you believe in God you haven't seen and hate the people you see every day? And if we are not for each other, then what are we for? Okay? And if you don't have a God that makes you love other people around you, you don't have a real God. You got a notion of God that's incorrect, but you don't have a real God. We can talk about that during question and answer, but I wanted to say that on a small, short, and calm note, so you know I know how serious it is. A third area is social organization. I know I'm running over time, but I need to go just a little bit longer, then I'm going to break.
Go ahead on. Take your time.
The third area is social organization, black people, guests, friends. Social organization has to do with rescuing and reconstructing the black family and beginning to rescue and reconstruct black male-female relationships. Nothing is more important in our community than that male and female be one. In fact, the only real number is one. The rest is repetition. We need each other. Black male-female relationships are important because of several things. Number one, because of species compulsion. This is what we need in order not simply to save the species, but to develop it. It is our grounding for development. Our relationship with each other is a school and an encouragement for our own development. Second, it's a measure of the level of any community or society. Turay and Nkrumah have said it. I can tell the level of your society by the quality of relationship between man and woman. It's also a peeping of the whole card of what you really like. You see, people might say, I'm for equality. I'm for my woman being equal. But see, I want to see what you do when you get home. And I want to see if you open the door for her in the car and close it on her in life. You know, a lot of times people give you minor privileges and take away major rights. That's what the white man did his woman. You know, he put her on a pedestal and locked her down in the house. That's why you had the feminist movement in reaction to that and said, look, we are full human beings. We define and develop our own interests. You don't have to impose on us. Well, black men don't want to think that they're affected by sexism, but we are. Conditions, social conditions create social consciousness. Tell me where you live and I'll tell you what you think. I've said it before, I say it again, it's hard to live in a whole house and not turn a trick. You might start off with the best intention, but sooner or later you pull your money out. If we live in a corrupt society, if we live in a capitalist, racist, sexist society, it's impossible for us to escape the effects of it without a very strong shield. And that shield is a cultural shield. And even then, you have to struggle to keep it up and repair it. That's why I say, you're not who you claim you are. You're what you are at the end of the day when you take inventory and measure what erosion has happened in your life as a result of attacks on your claims all day. The life we live is challenged every day to be black and self-respecting, to be black and achieving, to be black and proud. That's a dangerous posture. Got to walk with your head bowed. You got to play up and buck dance for the dominant race class. And if you dare to be other than that, you pay for it. And what I want you to understand is that is one of the reasons black family and community is so important, because it's a shield. It is, in fact, a free space, a ground in which we find rootedness and reinforcement. And if that's not there, we all are most vulnerable and miserable. We need each other, I'm saying. And we have to struggle against what I call the development of connections in American life. I do a whole lecture on connections versus relationships. We don't have time for it today, but I'm going to just skip over it in outline form. One of the major problems of our relationships, and this don't mean all black relationships are like that. Do you understand? I'm talking about those that have this problem, okay? I'm not saying everybody got this problem. But I would argue white people got this problem, Chicanos, Native Americans, everybody, because America affects this. The three basic structural tendencies in this country affect our relationship. Capitalism turns everything into a commodity and makes you think you can buy love or something warm enough to make you forget the difference. Hear me now.
That's right.
Racism teaches us to disappreciate black and to sniff after, run after, and try to capture the Viking. Try to integrate with the dominant class to get a measure of humanity we feel we don't have ourselves. Not everybody, I hope not even the majority, but enough to be a problem in history. Do you understand what I'm saying? White becomes the model. This is what's so amazing to me, that white could become the model of humanity. Look, I'm not against white folks. Let me just say this so y'all know this. I'm going to put this on the table. I am not against white folks as white folks. I'm against whites as oppressors. I'm against whites arrogant enough to try to speak for me or humanity. I'm against whites arrogating to themselves the identity of God. I'm against whites destroying history and humanity. That's what I'm against. And any angle you hear, that's what it's against, not the person per se. If the person meets me as a person, it's a person. Look, do I need to explain anymore? Now, what we're doing here is saying, look, racism teaches us to disappreciate ourselves. So a lot of time blood be leaving the black woman and be after the white woman. Now, does that mean, Maulana, I'm saying people can't love who they want? You can love who you want, but I'm telling you, can you be sure that's what you were doing? Is it love? Dressing up, masquerading is this or that. Sometimes it's priest, sometimes it's pope, sometimes it's rabbi, sometimes as preacher, sometimes whatever. You know what I mean? Scientist. But race, stripped of its cultural costume, is nothing but a socio-biological category used to assign human worth and social status using white folks as the paradigm. They are the model in all things, and they are the model in beauty. Now, the white man, I understand why the white man claims he's beautiful. You see, the white man discovered early, and I heard Frances Cress Wilson was here earlier, and I'm sure she told you this. The white man discovered early that he was different. That the majority of the people in the world wasn't like him. Now, you can take two approaches to difference. You can call it odd, which, be hard to do, or you can say you're unique. You can do either one. The white man chose to call himself unique. He had yellow hair and blue eyes. Ain't nobody ever had that. So he said, that's unique. Blinds have more fun. Bless him. Oh, I guess so. Let me dye my... Please. This is over a 300-year period. I mean, you understand? It took time. The white man had small lips. He could have called them undeveloped. And explained that was the reason lipstick was so important. He could have done that, understand? Or he could have said, these are fine features. I just want you to understand. See, I don't even like to talk stuff like this. Do you understand? But honestly, I don't. But I'm just showing you what racism has done to human dialogue. Do you know if I right now took a slide rule out of my pocket and went around and measured this man's nose and this man's nose and assigned them a place in this room based on that, you'd think I was crazy and have me arrested. But the white man did just that. He measured our nose and our lips and our hair texture, and he assigned us a place in history and society based on that. That's what I reject. And that's what I criticize with. And that's why I make satire out of it, and that's why I challenge it, not only here, but in my classroom and all around the country. And I will always do that. I've done that since the 60s. I don't change just because other people drop out of the movement and barbecue or see Jesus in the moon or you know, some of those stuff.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you.
My dignity is not a wig I can put on and take off at night, depending. My blackness is forever. I was black before I was born. That's why I'm black now. Black is not just, listen, black is not just my identity, it's my destiny and therefore my duty. Not only am I black, I'll be black forever.
Right.
That's why I repeat what Nathan Hare told me to tell the Negro trying to escape. You would never get out of the black race alive. Since we're going to be black forever. We're going to have to wake up. We're going to have one. Since we're going to be black forever, it's only natural that we should try to make the most out of it. And when I say that, I'm talking about culture, not just color, but culture and self-conscious practice to make a special contribution to the forward flow of human history. Each people has not only the right, but the responsibility to stand up, maintain its own culture, and speak its special truth to the world. Only then can you have true human dialogue. Now, I was talking about black male-female relationship, and I said we were affected by the sex, capitalism, racism, and then I was going to say sexism in this country. Sexism teaches us to see the woman in the most negative ways, to dominate her, to in fact reduce her to a sexual object of consumption. And we have to struggle against that. And I said that what happens is these relationships deteriorate into connections, and I make a distinction between connection and relation. A connection is a short-term association based on the mutual misuse of each other's body. A relationship is a long-term association based on mutual investment in each other's happiness, well-being, and development. There are 4 kinds of connection: the cash connection, flesh connection, the force connection, and the dependency connection. The cash connection says what I said. The woman's body is a commodity. You buy it. That's why mothers send their daughters to Meharry and Howard and other med schools or law schools to find a man that can take care of them. Many mothers do that. Not all of them, but enough to make a problem. There's something wrong with hiring your daughter out and telling your daughter that the criteria by which she should judge a man is whether or not he got money. Now, a lot of times people think they don't even believe that, but you do. Would you, Russ? No, not you, I'm sorry. People do. That's one of the problems of black speech sometimes. You know, we don't say one. So when I say one, it'd be more abstract. But if I say you, it can be personal or abstract. And maybe it needs to be personal, but I don't want it to be personal. I don't want to believe that a lot of people see a brother with a Volvo or BMW, and they assume that's a good basis for a relationship as opposed to a guy that's catching the bus. You understand? But the problem with that is if money is the mediator between your relationship and you put yourself in a position where you can't even provide for yourself, you always be a dependent person. You don't need anybody to take care of you, black woman. I mean, that's not even in the tradition of black women at their best. Harriet Tubman, Mary McLeod Bethune, the rest of them. That's not in your interest. If you are disabled, draw disability. But if you are not disabled, you need to define, defend, and develop your own interest and speak in equal voice with your man. Otherwise, you aid and abet his immorality and unethical behavior towards you. If you bow and straight, you corrupt him. Anna Julia Cooper, the lady I referred to earlier, said the principle here must be complementarity. And she said to the black man and the black woman, learn to be equal in a complementary way. She said to the sister, you don't need to cut your legs off to measure up to a midget man. Raise the guy's height so both of y'all can be tall.
Lord have mercy.
Give him creative challenge. Don't cater to him and his weaknesses. Turn his weaknesses into strength with the love you have for him and with the creative challenge you offer every day. The flesh connection means using the European as he does, advertising a woman. You ever seen how the European advertising woman use the woman to sell cars, salary, Bibles? It doesn't matter. You ever seen a Perrier commercial? What does that woman's buttocks have to do with water? You understand? So people see this in a pornographic way. They hack the woman's body into pornographic pieces and sell it. And people begin to think of the woman simply as a sexual object. And that's why you have this increase in date rape on all the campuses across the country, and why people do not respect the woman as a full human being, but as a receptacle for their sexual lust. We can't build a nation like that, and we should not imitate the people we say we're struggling against. Force connection is physical and ideological, and then dependency connection has to do with creating a being that is derivative rather than original. In order to overcome that, it seems to me that we need to set terms. We need to have common views and values. We need to develop friendship. We need a support system. We need constant renewal and common struggle. I've run out of time. Economic organization, we need cooperative economics and its socialist extension. We have to reject capitalism as an exploitative system. We have to reject imperialism, and we have to struggle to build a more cooperative and human community. Political organization has to do with building the Black Party, stressing more ethics in politics. We must build Pan-Africanism. We must support the struggle of African people all over the world, Namibia, South Africa, Australia. We must, in fact, free ourselves, because the people who cannot free itself can't free others. And then, of course, we must build third world unity and common struggle and begin to pose a new world for humankind. In terms of literature, we need to stop, in music, we need to stop dancing to music that humiliates black women and men, calls them freaks, freakazoids, and all that kind of stuff. We need to demand a new kind of music. We need a new literature that does not savage black men or women, but in fact teaches human possibility. Finally, let me close out. I'm sorry I went this long. Let me close out by saying, as I started, history is a very important thing. You achieve an ethos by practice in it. And you are able to answer Fanon's three questions. Who am I? Am I really who I am? And am I all I ought to be? I repeat, we're the fathers and mothers of human civilization. And we who are fathers and mothers of human civilization have no business playing the cultural children of the world. It is Fanon who said that we must, as black people and as third world people, dare to begin a new history of humanity. A history more respectful of human life and aspiration. A history against capitalism, a history against racism, a history against sexism. We can learn from Europe few things. Most of all, it will be what not to do. We must be unimpressed with its claims of social and cultural superiority and its religious claim to be the chosen people. The lesson of ancient Egypt is that the chosen of God is not by race or ritual, but by righteousness. We must reject European paradigms and dare to pose our own paradigm for how humans ought to be. Fanon said it, let us leave Europe, which is always talking about man, but wherever they find him, they're murdering him, down every street and in every city. It is our historical burden as African people, as third world people, as Fanon says, to dare invent, innovate, reach inside our own history and experience, and pose a new paradigm for human society and human relations. And we must join together with other third world progressive people in bringing into being a new world, a new man, and a new woman to inhabit and enjoy this. We must remember we have a moral obligation to stand up and speak our own special truth to the world. You who are students here and think that your life is your own, don't ever lie to yourself. You are our life is yours. You have it in our hand to destroy our future or to help build it. Don't ever think that what you do is not important. Martin Luther King said everything we do is important and everybody can be great because everybody can serve. Service is the criteria for greatness, not running around the world killing everybody like Alexander the Greek and telling the world he's the great. Great for what? Killing everybody he ran into? Greatness is service to humanity. Greatness is service to your community. Greatness is dedication to liberation, service to liberation and a higher level of human life. And I remind you what the ancient Egyptians said about you underestimating what you can do and what you ought to do. King Keti said, every day is a donation to eternity, and even 1 hour is a contribution to the future. I repeat, every day is a donation to eternity, and even 1 hour is a contribution to the future. And I close by saying, again from ancient Egyptian texts, to do that which is of value is forever, black people. A people called forth by their work do not die, for their name is raised and remembered because of it. May our name be raised and remembered because of our work and struggle for liberation and a higher level of human life. Thank you, sir. Dr. Bebe, should we take questions?
Sure,
we have time for some questions. I'm sorry I went a little long. In fact, I really, each one of those sections is a whole lecture. So what I was trying to do is squeeze all that into one lecture. So if I said something that you need clarified or something you'd like to challenge or support or question me about, please, what you said and ask Yusuf, if I understand correctly, let me quote Fanon again. If you haven't read Fanon, you should. I'm saying to the student. And if you can't read all his books, read one book, The Wretched of the Earth. And if you can't read that whole book, read the last chapter. But anyhow, Fanon says in one of his books, he said each generation, in Wretched of the Earth, each generation, listen to this now, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its own mission. And having discovered it, either betray or fulfill it. Every generation must set for itself a goal. That is because, as I said earlier in my lecture, a generation that does not advance its people further than its parents is a generation that has less reason for existence. That the way we make ourselves is by creation, by practice. I am a teacher. I am a teacher because I teach, i.e. I engage in the practice of teaching. If a woman is a doctor, it's because she practices medicine. If a man is a lawyer, it's because he practices law. Practice in the final analysis proves everything. Even the question about your equality is proved in practice. Not in abstract arguments, that's the basis. You can lay the intellectual basis for it. But in the final analysis, history demands social practice. I've said it before, I say it again. Practice proves everything. No matter how many books you read on swimming, sooner or later you got to jump in the water. So that the black student must discover its mission. And its mission is always within the same framework our mission has been since the pyramids. Social justice and the contribution to the forward flow of human history. The struggle to raise the level of humanity. The struggle to make a better human and to create the context for a better human. The Egyptians taught that a good context creates a good person. And that if you want to cultivate a good person, you must create a good context. You must struggle for freedom, for free space, for yourself, and it will affect everybody. We are on the bottom, therefore any movement we make affects the whole system. That is why our struggle has such human import, is because if blacks win it, everybody automatically got it. Let me tell you now, we struggled in the 60s and we opened the door. Once you let a black in, anybody can come in. There's not a person in the world can come in after we come in. Do you understand that? I want you to understand that. We must understand that role and play it well. It's not a badge of shame. It's a heavy historical burden we must honor. Black students, your first duty is to study. Your second duty is to turn knowledge into social practice. In fact, the only justification for education is that it enhances your ability to make a greater social contribution. You know, knowledge for knowledge. Stop lying. When they train you, do you know why the Europeans set up this university? So that he could train you to fit in the system he had in place. That's why it's just sickening for the Europeans to tell us when we talk black studies, oh, that's all. Well, I forgot what he said, some lie. But what he says, oh yeah, that's political. It was so silly I couldn't remember it. That's political. The guy said, that's political. What is more political than white studies? Do you remember when, before the 60s, y'all don't have this kind of memory. Many of y'all are very young and don't remember this, but your parents do. Do you realize in 1966 there were no black studies course? And the white man argued, ain't no black studies. You know why? You ain't done nothing, you can't have a course on it. Now, we closed the universities down and said, hey, you know what? What you got here is just self-glorification. You got knowledge of 1/4 of the world's population and lying about teaching the universal truth. How you gonna have the universal truth? You left out the fathers and mothers of human civilization and don't have 3/4 of the world in it. So we ain't gonna have no more white studies until we have some black and Mexican and Native American studies. School's out today, children. You understand? Then the guy saw it. Now look, what we did though, listen, we could never have done that if we didn't have support in the community. The first struggle that the students engaged in was not on campus, but was in the street. Do you understand that? SNCC, the next favorite organization to my own, us. SNCC is a very important organization in our history. And it deserves to be remembered. It deserves to be studied. SNCC taught the student that the student not only had an academic responsibility, she or he had a social responsibility. And SNCC put the people in the streets, in the sit-down movement, in the freedom ride movement, in the organization of Southern co-ops, in the organization of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, in the organization of the Black Panther Party of Lowndes County, on which the Panther Party in Oakland took its name, from which it took its name. SNCC was very important in teaching that education must be for something. Education must be for human liberation, for a high level of human life. It cannot be vulgar careerism. In the turn of the century, Du Bois and Booker T. Washington had the same argument. Booker T. Washington said, let's just, teach them how to make money. Booker T. believes what some of the black bourgeoisie believe today. Money can cure it all. But I told you that takes blood money in a minute. The richest black in the worst circumstances still, part of this word in quotation I whisper, is still a nigger. Do you understand that? In the worst circumstances, the white man calls this guy still a nigger. Rescue me if I'm wrong. And until we can stop him from using that word and building relations around it, every one of us is going to be one of them. We just have to run into the redneck to remind us. Do you understand that? That's all that's going on here. So what the black student must do is study and then get socially involved. But even in an academic environment, remember, you must challenge the established paradigm of knowledge. You must challenge not only what they teach, but the motive for which they teach it. It's a knowledge for oppression. It's a knowledge for uncritical thinking. You must teach critical thinking, and you must make a merciless criticism of everything that he teaches. Do you understand that? You must challenge it. And even if you can't challenge it on your test, do like I did. Take 2 sets of notes. when to get an A and when to get away. What you've got to do is know your enemy and yourself and control yourself until the hour of action is announced. And get out of school. Get out of school with your PhD, with your doctorate, you know, with your training, whatever, your professional degree. Get out of school. Then you can speak. You think I would be here or in the UC system now if I just stayed on the corner talking bad about the white man? In fact, I'm getting a second degree. You know, the more knowledge you get, the more capable you become. The reason I'm getting a second degree, I shouldn't just drop that out. The reason I'm getting a second degree, I'm getting a second doctorate in social ethics because I believe that black studies, which is my field, has to be informed and expanded by the new discourse on ethics. And I believe that we should rescue and reconstruct our ethical history, which is there, but no one has intellectualized in the way it needs to be, all the way from ancient Egypt to Malcolm and Martin Luther King, okay? And I think that if you notice, ethical discourse is becoming the major form of social criticism. You will look at it in the question of ethics, business ethics, computer ethics, biomedical ethics, nuclear ethics, environmental ethics. And I think black studies has to have a position on that because we came into being making an ethical criticism of the established order, both academically and socially. That's where we're rooted, in ethical criticism. So I want a paradigm of black studies that absorbs that ethical criticism and expands it and rescues that rich legacy we have all the way back to our classical African civilization in Egypt up to today. And we have a lot to say about that. So I'm saying to the students, and I didn't say the last part of Du Bois, and I want to say it before I get out. Vulgar careerism is one of your major threats as black students. That is, the tendency to just want to go to school to get some money. And Booker T. Washington said that's what you should do. I don't want to put Booker T. Washington down because Booker T. Washington was not just a Tom like the white liberal wants us to believe. Booker T. Washington was an institution builder. And if he wasn't there and dedicated to his people, Garvey would never wanted to see him. And Garvey is the father of black nationalism. Booker T. built institutions. I just came from Tuskegee. I mean, that's Booker T. Washington's legacy. Do you understand? We have to give people credit. We don't have to agree with everything they do. And yeah, I can say Booker T. Tommed a little bit, but I've seen a lot of people tom. There's a lot of people be tomming, you know, foot dragging and stuff. Some of the things Martin Luther King said, I could never bring myself to say. Like he gonna love the white man, wear him down with love. I can't say nothing like that. But Martin Luther King was a great man. We got to be able to disagree with people on one or two things and still respect them and love them for what they've given us. But anyhow, Booker T was so, even though I say that I'm not condemning the man, the man took, it's so much to say, the man took the three fundamental systems in America and used them to build institutions for black people. Capitalism, racism, and Christianity. He told the old Christians who really were patriarchal and paternalistic, look, we're going to have a moral regeneration in black communities so they could feel good and contribute some money for philanthropy. He told the capitalists, look, I'm going to give you a working force that won't strike, a pliant working force, a law working force. Cast down your bucket where you are, fool. You understand? Then he said, this on his breath. He called him a fool. Booker T knew what it was. If you read his private correspondence, he was hard on the white man because he knew the white man was making him buck unnecessarily. And then he told the racists, and this is why I stand with Booker. He told the racists, look, I don't want to live next to you. I don't want your woman. You understand? I just want you to stop killing me. You understand? He says, in all things purely social, we can be one as a hand. But in all things, pardon me, I'm sorry. What is it now? In all things purely social, we can be as one as a hand, but in all things personal, separate as a finger. Something like that. I don't know what, that doesn't strike me. Social, in all things political, all things personal. Okay, what he said is, I don't want to be with you. Don't flatter yourself. But he said it cute, though. He said, in all things And I got it. In all things social, we can be as separate as the fingers of the hand. But one as the hand in all things for mutual progress. And I believe that. We live in America, and America is a multinational project. We can be one as a hand. We can build this country, make it beautiful, make it freedom-loving, and make it a force for peace and freedom in the world rather than imperialistic aggression. Okay? I believe that. But we can also be separate. I don't have to marry white folks or kiss up to white folks to feel equal. If I want to do something with them, good. If y'all want to invite them, good. I'm not going to condemn you for that. If you want to go to school and talk with them, good. That's the way the country works. But I don't want them to be arrogant enough to believe I need to be with them. Do you understand? Thanks, brother. Booker T. Washington said, look, let's make money and then they will respect us. Let's make ourselves useful and then they respect us. Du Bois said, look, let me tell you something, Booker. He said, if you teach people to make money, all you've made is money makers. You've not made men and women who are socially conscious and committed and competent. Social competence means that you're able to define, defend, and develop your interests. Social commitment means you understand you must educate yourself to better your own people and to build your own community. One of the most tragic things that has happened, and y'all must have read a lot about it, and the most definitive work on it is William J. Wilson. And people attacked him at first. I did too, for declining significance of race. But this new book he's written called The Truly Disadvantaged is a very important book. And what he documents is how we've become three communities in one. The middle class, the working class, and the underclass. And the underclass is more and more pushed to the margin of the community. Crime-ridden, dope affected, welfare dependent, rough. The middle class, brain drained, left. Turn the community over to the thugs, the lumping, the mediocre. The working class had to get out too to protect itself. But the first move was the middle class. The black middle class, the reformist and reactionary segment of the black middle class. And I say that because I make a distinction between the progressive and the segment of the middle class to which I belong. I'm in the middle class, but I've committed class suicide. I'm not suffering. You can see that. So I don't want you to think I'm just mad and on the outside like white men said, frustrated. What I am, though, is very concerned that this reactionary and non-progressive segment of the middle class, through its integrationist fantasies, left the community and took its brains and disestablished the institutions. So that the black community that now forms three segments, middle class, working class, and underclass, is less strong than it was. And that the underclass is getting worse off because they don't have the skill and the institutions that the black community used to have. It all left with the middle class, or a significant part of it. And we've got to rebuild the black community. We will never be free, we will never realize our full potential until we build and rebuild the black community. And the black students have a very important role in that. Not to be vulgar careerists, but to ask yourself, who am I? Am I really who I am? And am I all I ought to be? And that question is answered in social practice in your own community. And you can have whatever friends you want. Cesar said, you can choose your friends, but not your brothers and sisters. Those are yours. And for better or worse, you got to deal with it. But why hate them? We have so much reason to love each other. We have so much reason to reinforce each other. We have a beautiful life. When we really get down, you know, whether it's at church or at a dance or at a discussion, whether we're working on a project or just walking down the street, there's a specialness about black people. Have you ever noticed? That's how you can recognize them in a crowd. Did you know that? And that's how a different warmth comes into the room. I don't want to get mystical, you know what I mean? But I want you to understand that there is a spirituality about us that we need to respect and keep alive And that's our contribution not only to ourselves, but to humanity. I think maybe we have time for one more. I didn't mean to be that long, but yes, sir. Oh, no, more people are supporting Jackson now than ever. People didn't support him at the beginning, but I don't know any major black politician that's not for him. Do you? Yeah, all of them. As far as I know, that's what they're saying. Now, let me tell you something, though. I could be wrong on that, but from what I saw and heard, that was the latest news. Let me tell you, the first time they didn't because of two things. One, just inherent class rivalry. You know, the middle class fights all the time. White middle class fights, too. They're killing each other. But I'm just saying that there's a rivalry at first for justice. Second, many of the people in the middle class were tied to white patrons. So they had to run with Mondale, Alan Cranston. What are those other people running? They're not even relevant, but they were running, remember? And for every black that stood up, that was a white patron that he owed allegiance to. That's just reality, okay? They don't have that need anymore because the lightweights that are running now never developed any basis for loyalty in the black community. They don't have no history of that. People like Mondale and before him, Hubert Humphrey and them had long roots of support for black issues so that blacks felt almost obligated to support them in a political thing. But you don't have that problem now. Also, Jesse proved he was durable. And Jesse proved you had to come to terms with them or you would suffer politically. Now let me tell you about Jesse. I believe, and then I'm going to end. I believe that Jesse is one of the most important people in our history, and I like Jesse. I don't like what Jesse's doing now, but I liked what he was doing first. I liked him in 1984, and even though I disagree with some of the things he's saying or doing now, it's not an antagonistic dislike. It's just a wish for the old days. And what do I mean by the old days? In 1984, the guy stood up and spoke the truth regardless. He reopened a dialogue we had that was missing since the 60s. Do you understand that? He talked social issues. He talked against racism, against sexism, talked against imperialism. He was in the third world rescuing prisoners. I mean, the man was just dynamic. And what he did was reaffirmed our historical tradition of setting the moral and progressive agenda for America. Second, I liked him because he challenged, even though he didn't do it completely, the monopoly that the Democrats have on us. You know, if a Democratic person run and it was howdy doody, we most likely would vote for him. You know what I mean? We just got caught up in the Democratic Party. And so the Democrats developed a contempt for us where they just took us for granted. They never thought that one of us would challenge their structure and run regardless of whether they said so or not. But you see, Jesse couldn't follow through with that because in 1972 in Gary and in Little Rock afterwards and in Cleveland, he didn't support a black party. So even when the Democrats didn't give him what he wanted, he couldn't do anything about it. I liked him also because he taught blacks the power of the vote and said, yeah, electoral politics is no panacea. It's not going to cure everything. But you can do something. And if Jews with 3 million people can have this impact on the country, then people who can register 18 million ought to have some kind of impact. And that politics is about gaining, maintaining, and using power. And it has to do with gathering and organizing strength on every level of life, and electoral politics is one of those levels. I liked him also because he taught human possibility. Guy didn't have no money. The middle class was against him. You know the white man was against him, Jew and Gentile. And the Jews were really hard on Jesse. And my position is they're not hard on Jesse because Jesse said hi me, even though Jesse apologized for that. Jesse said that was a slip. But Jesse likes Jews. That's what I can't understand. Jesse is an integrationist from his heart. You know what I mean? He's right in Martin Luther King's tradition. Jesse got, well, I'm not even going to tell you all the things Jesse said, but Jesse, nobody that really is honest could say that Jesse is anti the Jews. And besides, let me tell you, Jaime is not the same as nigger. It's some restaurants in Los Angeles named Jaime. You understand? There's no restaurants named nigger. You understand? So it's really not the same thing. Even though Jesse admitted it was tasteless and insensitive, if the Jew feels that that's the wrong word to call it, and he's appealing to them, he has to be sensitive to that, okay? So Jesse admitted that, all right? But I'm saying they attacked him not just because of that, because really, they have forgiven other people for worse things. Yeah. So what happened is that Jesse was penalized because he dared to be independent, because he didn't come and pay homage and ask to run and ask for money to run. And besides, he then stepped out and dared he could be independent. So he's being penalized for that. Now what he's trying to do is correct that. He's putting more Jews and Gentiles on his staff. And that appeased some of them, but some of them say, we're going to always hate you. Wait, people like that. This is real. Do y'all know that? Read it. Do y'all keep up with the news? They say I ain't going to never forgive Jesse. So my point with Jesse is stop trying to like him and make up. You done said what you had to say. Tough after that. You know what I mean? I like Jesse also, let me tell you this. I like Jesse also in terms of human possibilities because even though he didn't have no money, he was on television all the time. Remember? Listen. Why was he on television all the time?
Because he was a black man.
No, not because he was a black man. Look, this brother's a black man. Was he on television? He's running now. He's not on television all the time. All right now. Tell me why he was on. This ain't no truth or consequence. Because he was dynamic. Because he spoke things that challenged America in the way it was run. Do you understand? Because he not only spoke on domestic issues, like the Jews and the Gentiles told Jesse, he ought to come on back from Cuba and Syria and deal with domestic issues. What? We're supposed to deal with welfare, but they're going to deal with Israel and Rome and Ireland. You understand? We got to stay and talk welfare and food stamps. You understand? It's madness. I'm telling you, it's a rough world. But Jesse would get on television and he would talk a hard line straight from the 60s. Y'all know that. Even if you're mad with him, you know he did. But now he's not on television because he changed his position. He softened it. Somebody told, let me just tell you the last reason I like Jesse though, before I say, the last reason I like Jesse is because he demystified the presidency. Jesse told the white man, you do not have a monopoly on this office. I'm running for it. And listen. You can't say you got better credentials than me. None of you had the moral and social history I have. Many of you have less international experience. And besides, people, if a bumbling skier can run, if a crook by his mother's admission, if a decadent cowboy acting out old B-movie rail, a guy that can't even read cue cards, a guy that sleeps in front of an audience with the Pope. If these failures can run for president, there's hope for everybody. Now, what Jesse has done, and we got to go after it, what Jesse has done is that somebody has told Jesse he shouldn't sound like a preacher. For a little while, I was advising Jesse, just a little while. And I told Jesse, I said, look, Jesse, you got to maintain the moral high ground. Anybody can be a cheap politician. You can buy them, rent them, lease them. Sometimes you don't even have to ask them for nothing. I said, but how many people can speak with the moral authority you can? Not only because you're a minister, but because you sacrifice your adult life to struggle for a better America and for liberation for your people. Stay with that. But somebody's told Jesse to talk like a politician. Jesse doesn't even talk with the rhythm anymore he used to talk. You've seen it. It used to be a pleasure to hear him. That's our gift. Why change it and sound like Max Headroom? You understand? That's cold. Is that cold business? But I like Jesse. I think we should support Jesse, but I think we ought to always, be able to offer fraternal and soror criticism and not just write people off. Sometimes we just like to be angry with people. My thing with Jesse is, like a fraternal criticism. I would like Jesse to be strong and speak for the voiceless again with more. It doesn't mean he's not. He's speaking for the farmers and other people. He certainly speaks for us all the time, but it's with a different tone and a different emphasis. And I would wish he would get back the other one. And really, I have a great empathy for Jesse because, no matter what he does, they won't let him alone. He won. They pretended that the people in Iowa wouldn't vote for him. He got double digits, and they try to explain that away. They say, well, he's having big crowds, bigger than other people, but the question is, will they vote for him? Well, they didn't ask nobody else that. Do you understand? They don't want Jesse to win. Jesse deserves support, especially to people who believe in electoral politics. And he's still the best candidate out there. But let me just end by saying this. It's not important for Jesse to win the presidency. In fact, he might be a problem if he did. Because the presidency is an institution. The government is an institution. And it's madness to imagine one man can change a 300-year-old institution. It makes for unrealistic expectations, and it puts Jesse in a bag where he has to prove to the white man he's equal by not giving us attention. What's important about Jesse is his running, is his organizing the masses, is his engaging in political education and teaching black and other marginal people, other people on the outside of the political struggle, teaching them human possibility, teaching them to speak and work for their own interests. That is ultimately more important than the symbolic acquisition of a place where idiots assemble. Thanks again to Dr. Debbie and Laura.